Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome into Denver Sports Coffee Break, presented by Superbook Sports. DMAC, how are you this morning? Yesterday was a little sad, but I feel like I'm well rested. I'm ready for the week. How about you, my friend?
I feel okay. I'm sad. It's disappointing.
For sure.
Enjoyed watching the games with you, which is one of the highlights that I don't get crammed into those other ridiculous muggles. So we had a good time. We were excited at certain points. I mean, when they everybody should have seen me and Rachel when we thought they had tied up the game.
We literally jumped out of our seats, which is like, honestly, it's a big no-no. Like, when you're in the press, you're supposed to just like stay very, I don't know, like nonchalant. You're supposed to just kind of pay attention. And both DMAC and I were like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Well, we were in the barely a press box, so I felt okay. So we were in that was in the stands, but which was fine, which was more than fine. And your emotions just kind of got caught up with it because it felt like okay. I
Yeah.
mean, here we go, and it is one of those quirky rules of technology that NHL teams have access to that they can go and review the beginning of plays, even if the play happens massively after the infraction occurs.
I know. And just seeing Nathan McKinnon's face every single time something goes wrong, the fact that they always show his face, I feel so bad for him. And in the locker room too, you could just tell he was furious. And actually, one thing that stood out to me, DMAC, was everybody stayed on the ice, and of course they raised their stick to thank the fans. Nathan McKinnon was gone. Nathan McKinnon was in that locker room. He was not out there when they were all thanking the fans, which we all know how very serious Nathan McKinnon is, but I just thought that was interesting.
I felt well. I mean, the guy who really seemed impacted the most was Cale Makar,
Oh my
who
god.
full uniform for like 20 minutes. Like he couldn't muster the energy to change, which of course is incredibly ironic, as there was a very similar scene with Ryan O'Reilly after they lost 9 years ago to the date
Yeah.
against the Minnesota Wild in the first round, and it was the same thing. Ryan O'Reilly couldn't take off his uniform, including skates, and neither could Cale Makar. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that both of those signature moments happened with two superstars for the Avs 9 years apart to the date, hey, let's never play a game seven on April 30th ever again. And so I felt it from Makar. However, speaking of Mikko Rantanen, he said it was the weirdest year he's ever experienced in his professional life.
Yeah.
And the Nichushkin stuff, I think, had a deep impact. I just think, and then you got the Cogliano broken neck stuff, and I think the Avalanche did outplay the
Mm-hmm.
Kraken in Game 6, which they won, in Game 7, in which they lost. I mean, the goal that Kraken scored for their first goal went off Ben Meyer's glove.
Yeah.
It wasn't as if the Kraken were dominating anything. Their second goal was very legit. But Rachel, that's only two goals. You got zero goals from your bottom six forwards.
Yep.
Zero. It just was, Rachel, it was just too much. It
Mm-hmm.
was too much. And there's part of me that thinks it sucked last night, and I wish they were still playing. But there's no way this team was going to win the Stanley Cup this year. I mean, there's just no way. So perhaps the more that they can just sort of rest, sort of decompress, reset, perhaps the better. They have huge questions to answer. Will Gabriel Landeskog come back healthy? And will Val Nichushkin come back at all?
Yep. No, that's 100%. And I'm going to be interested to see what we find out now that the season has wrapped up, because Jared Bednar, also in the presser yesterday, was talking about how like some guys were battling injuries that we didn't even know about, and of course that information will come out. So it's going to be, this Avs team was not healthy at all, and it was one thing after another. Obviously the Makar suspension really hurt this run. Cogliano with the broken neck, we hope he's doing okay. There was just so many things, and sometimes they say you just can't get over the hill when there's some stuff just rolling at you all the time, and that was the truth. But I do want to talk about, we're going to continue the Avalanche talk, I promise everybody, but real quick, the big news coming out of the morning is the Broncos are going to sign Jerry Judy's 5th-year extension, essentially. So I want to bring in Will Peterson and James Marilat as well. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good Hello. Morning.
How's everyone doing? James has a big smile on his face. Will, love the hat again, my friend.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I mean, Listen, people on social media are upset. I said the Avalanche need to look at Valeri Nichushkin's contract. I don't know how that's some sort of controversial take after he misses 5 straight playoff games and their season ends. But apparently to some people, you can't bring that up, even though there's a police report in Seattle.
That is shocking.
Listen,
I don't know how he returns to the team. I mean, you had Denny Nagel exercised from the Rockies for picking up a hooker on Colfax. This seems much more complicated, and maybe they just want to get rid of Denny Nagel, period. I can understand why they wouldn't want to give up Nichushkin, but I don't know what choice. We'll see how everything goes. But if it goes the way we think it's going to go and the results are what we think they are, I don't know how they bring him back.
listen, I'm with you guys, but I got to take umbrage. We were 7 minutes into the show, and DMAC already made me mad. Like, we're not going to let this be Avalanche excuse, right? Oh, all these injuries and all. It's like, Nathan McKinnon was out there. Cale Makar was out there. Mikko Rantanen was out there. Arguably 3 of the 10 best players in the league. And you lose in the first round of the freaking Kraken? Like, what are we doing here? I mean, let's not give them a free pass. And this is a team that you can make the argument in the last 5 years, they've had the best roster in the NHL over that 5-year span. 3 second-round exits, 1 first-round exit, and 1 cup. They're feast or famine, and they have underachieved with this core group. And it falls on the front office. It doesn't fall on, oh, shucks, injury problems. And I don't want to hear that they couldn't win the cup. There was one team going into the playoffs that scared us, and they got bounced last night in the game before the Avs, and that was the Bruins. So, no, they blew a golden opportunity last night. They blew it, and people need to be held accountable.
Time out. So if I'm reading you right, you wanted Cale Makar and Mikko Rantanen to do more?
Cale Makar did nothing last night. Nathan McKinnon was great. Mikko Rantanen was great. Cale Makar disappeared in this series. Raise your hand if you have a good Cale Makar memory from this series. Turnover after turnover last night. In Game 7, he was awful. Awful. Let's just call it out. Let's stop. Everybody has to just pitter-patter around the teams in this town and around the players and around the stars. Cale Makar stunk last night. In Game 7, he stunk. He did. Let's just say it.
Well, and also, guys, people are upset that I said Chris MacFarland needs to be held accountable. I'm not saying fire Chris MacFarland, but oh boy, is he off to an awful start as the Avalanche's GM. Joe Sakic was great. He never missed. But this transition of taking Sakic to president and MacFarland to GM reminds me an awful lot of John Elway going to president and George Payton going to GM. It's been a total whiff so far. Re-signing Valeri Nichushkin over Nazem Kadri was a disastrous decision, and sitting on his hands at the trade deadline, especially once Landeskog was out for the year, also not cool. Chris MacFarland right now, I'm glad he got his picture with the Stanley Cup, but he hasn't done anything to help these current Avs.
Joe Sakic directed The Hangover. Chris MacFarland directed The Hangover 2. That's what happened.
Hindsight, fun, isn't it, guys? Hindsight is a lot of...
No. We were saying this. Somebody was saying this about Nazem Kadri in the offseason. He had 3 opportunities to re-sign him. You chose Nichushkin, miss. You didn't trade Girard, miss. Raise your hand if you remember a Sam Girard moment from this series. He was awful. And then you could have said, hey, Eric Johnson, EJ, nobody wants to say this because, again, we got a pitter-patter. EJ needed to retire. They paid him $6 million this year to do zilch, nada, nothing. Those 3 guys took the money that should have gone to Nazem Kadri, and then Will's right. Sat on their hands at the trade deadline. You know why? Because they had already won a cup. Last year it was push all the chips in. We're desperate. We got to win one. They were fat and comfy. Fat and sassy. That's what they were. They were fat and sassy.
It is so funny you say that, though, because I just saw somebody in the comment who was like, apparently I'm not the only one who's sassy today. Sassy's going to be the term of the show, apparently, everybody. Wow. First of all, you 2 came out firing. I was not expecting it. I was expecting a little bit more of a funeral, but we're just full on going with it today.
No. Some people get ripped at their funeral.
Okay, well, DMAC, you're the one here who said, you know what? Nichushkin was the way. All 3 of us did say we think the Avs should have signed Nazem Kadri. So how are you feeling about?
Nichushkin is 28 years old. Listen, I know he had problems when he first came in with Dallas. I do. I know he had issues. But the Avalanche had a great sort of program with him to get his confidence up and, basically not have any problems with Nichushkin for the entire time he's been there. And he was unbelievable. And he started the season in a brilliant way. Kadri had the same numbers as JT Compher for the season, and the Flames didn't even make the playoffs. Okay. So saying Kadri more than Nichushkin, boy, is that hindsight being 2020. I get it now, but I had no idea, Nichushkin during the playoffs was going to be with a woman who didn't want to be in the United States and had her passport taken away by a bad man and then sent to parts unknown. Okay, you win that one because I bet you Kadri wouldn't, have gotten in that mess. You do win that one, but I couldn't see that coming. And I think as constituted, this team would have been a total title contender if you did have the players healthy who you thought were going to be healthy. And you did not know that Landeskog was going to be out for the whole season. You did not know. And you gave one of your greatest players in franchise history the benefit of the doubt. God forbid you're loyal to a player. And it didn't work out. It sucks. I didn't know Andrew Cogliano was going to get a broken neck and the guy Eberle who was going to do it wasn't going to get suspended. I didn't know Helm wasn't going to be around. Manson was going to miss 55 games. You bring up Eric Johnson. Eric Johnson was about to be scratched. And maybe that helps you to your point that they shouldn't have done it. And I get it. I do get it. Lars Zeller, Matt Nieto, Dennis Mulligan did not make a bit of difference. So if you want to get on the Avalanche, you can. That's fair. But at least in terms of the Kadri thing, I think that is really revisionist history.
Not when we said it at the time. We said it at the time. So that's not revisionist history. It's not saying, oh, well, now if I could go back in time, I would change my opinion. It was my opinion at the moment.
You would take a 5'10", 32-year-old over a 6'3", 28-year-old who was arguably one of the MVPs of the Stanley Cup.
I would.
Yeah. Kadri was a heart and soul guy, D-Mac. This team didn't have leadership. It didn't have heart and soul this year. It's because Landeskog could never return and because they let Kadri walk out the door. And a lot of that is on Chris McFarland, the GM, who is George Payton 2.0.
What they didn't have goal scoring, guys. They didn't get any contributions from the bottom six, and they played an entire playoff series.
Chris McFarland assembled a bad roster.
Well, they didn't have a second line. They played without a second line. So, okay.
They had two great players. Otherwise, they get swept. If Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen don't play in that series, they get swept. And the biggest injury that happened from the start of the series to the end was McCann. Seattle had a bigger injury than, losing Cogliano. Terrible looking play. The fact that he came back in the third period is a whole nother conversation. Like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? But McCann was the biggest injury, and Seattle didn't just curl up like a roly-poly and complain about injuries. They didn't.
Really quick, if you want to have a Cale Makar was disappointing in the playoffs conversation, I'm up for that. You're certainly not going to get rid of Cale Makar. He's one of the best defensemen in the world. But it was disappointing. He didn't produce offensively. He did cause a hit to McCann that was worthy of suspension. So was Eberle's hit against Cogliano, in my opinion. They both were. And when you saw Makar in full uniform, just like Ryan O'Reilly 9 years ago, unable to take off his uniform, including his skates, for forever after the game was over, up to 20, 30 minutes after the game was over, you saw a guy who was bothered by his performance and what had just happened. You could tell that he was disappointed in himself. And I think Makar, who had missed 10 games going into the season, was kind of wiped out too. I doubt he was fully healthy as well. Listen, guys, this team needs a break. They need to go to a beach, have a couple of margaritas, get healthy, and come back because the core of this team still exists. So I'm not writing them off. I understand the frustration, but this was bound to happen. They were way too desperate just to win the set. I hope we all learned a lesson, by the way, in hockey, when we see the Lightning, Bruins, and Avalanche all tap out. Home ice doesn't matter in hockey. It doesn't. What matters more is that you're healthy and that you're in a more positive vibe going into the postseason. James, I get you. You hate load management. But if you ever want to see a team that needed load management going into this playoff series, it was the Avalanche. Juxtapose that to what the Nuggets did. They cruised after the All-Star game. They got big chunks of time off, and they're destroying teams.
That's such, you're picking your spot. Who had to struggle to get into the playoffs to the last day? The Florida Panthers. Who just knocked Boston out? The Florida Panthers. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But again, this isn't going to be Avalanche excuse. It's just not. I mean, they had an opportunity, and this is what the decision they needed to make last offseason. Of, hey, we have a great core, championship windows close quickly. We have a good enough team. Let's go make history. Let's try and win 3 in a row and become the first team to do that in 40 years since the Islanders in the early 80s. Instead, they worried about, what's our cap hit going to be in 2028? Who gives a hoot? Who gives a hoot? By then, this team's going to be bad. They're going to be rebuilding. Fine. But instead it was, let's wring our hands about what the cap hit's going to be in 5 years. Okay. Did y'all enjoy watching good cap space in 2028 last night? That was a real joy. They dropped the ball. They had an opportunity to make history, then they dropped the ball. And it's the difference between good and great. And the great ones find a way to do it year after year after year after year and find that motivation. It's what separates Kobe and Michael and Tom Brady and guys like that versus the one and dones. The Avs are the Mavericks with Nowitzki. That's what they are. They got 1 title. Awesome. It was great. It was a fun parade. But I have no faith that Chris McFarland's going to put this team back in a position where they're going to be contending for a cup again next year. Just no faith after what we saw this year.
What I would agree with too, and I think actually even probably Cale Makar, if you talk to him, would say, they're going to tell the media, we're so happy or proud of how well this team played, yada, yada, yada. The fact that Cale Makar sat at his locker so long last night essentially shows you that he was so disappointed in his play and probably where they ended up. And it's unfortunate and it sucks. But now kind of the question going back to James is, do you guys believe that this team can bounce back next year and be a cup
contender?
I don't want to say contender, but that feels far-fetched at this moment, I won't lie to you, because they don't have the depth. And yeah, you get back maybe Nichushkin, maybe Landy, Darren Helm would be great, Cogliano, but it still feels like they can't be a contender. It just feels so far-fetched in this moment because of how bad the depth is. But Will Peterson, to you, what's your faith in this team as you look ahead to next season, even though we're a ways off, obviously, now?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you got to figure out the Nichushkin situation and if you can void the contract. Because if you can get out of the contract, then you've got some great cap space to go pursue. Sidney Crosby, that ring a bell to anyone? He's Nathan McKinnon's best friend. The Penguins just missed the playoffs for the first time in 16 years. And there's a chance that the Avalanche could do it again like they did with Ray Bourque and Paul Kariya and Teemu Selanne. Bring in a veteran when he's near the end of his road. Sidney Crosby could help get this team over the top if you get Gabe Landeskog back as well. Eric Johnson's money's gone. Sam Girard you can trade. And if you can get out of the Nichushkin deal, it's like $20 million in cap space. So, yeah, you bring in Crosby and you have McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, Landeskog, you can win the cup again next year, no doubt. But Chris McFarland needs to get to work because right now his reputation as a GM in this town isn't a very good one. He's looking like Dan O'Dowd 2.0.
Everything hinges on Landeskog and Nichushkin for next year and what you do with those two guys and what happens with them. So, that's what it's all about, those two guys. And then there'll be a ripple effect on everybody else. Cogliano likely will be done. Eric Johnson will be gone. I doubt, I don't know, Evan Rodriguez was signed to a 1-year deal. Is he that big of a deal? Are you going to move on from Alex Newhook? He was useless, and then, you got to figure out what you're doing with Girard. But with Byram, Taves, and Makar, you have a really good new. Oh, and you're going to lose Jack Johnson, too. There's going to be massive turnover, guys. Massive turnover. And part of the problem is you had a lot of guys playing who should never have been out there in the first place. Can you believe it? We were on our edge of our seats whether or not Curtis McDermott was actually going to play in that game. He was out for the warm-up skate. It was like, oh, man, here we go. Curtis McDermott, it's time. Brad Hunt was activated to play forward. He's a defenseman. And his first time is playing as a forward. Ben Myers, nice story, college star, so what? I mean, there's a lot of guys that should have been fourth line at best. Yeah, a lot of them are gone. There'll be a major overhaul of this team, I don't think having available money is going to be much of a problem. And again, that's why the two biggest decisions will be Landeskog and Nichushkin. They're the highest profile guys with the most money that are the most significant players on your team. What you do with those two guys will impact everything else for next year.
Yeah, I don't think though we should give the front office a free pass when it comes to Landeskog. If you're right, they didn't know he was going to be out the rest of the year at the trade deadline. They also didn't know he was coming back. He hadn't played all year, so shame on them for assuming he would come back. That was a miscalculation. Evan Rodriguez, you mentioned, there's another guy they signed. He was a disaster. If I heard it once, I heard it 100 times during the series. Off Rodriguez's stick. Like, that guy was just a turnover machine. He was bad. Like, it just seems like every move they made was a miss. Yeah. You compound that with injuries and the Nichushkin situation, and it was a confluence of just all things bad. But it started with the fact that this was a team last year that came at you in waves. It was like, man, their second line, their third line, their fourth line. They had two guys this year. So to go from what they were to what they were this year, that's not all just injuries. It's not just because Darren Helm couldn't play and Cogliano got hurt in Game 6. I think that's a free pass that shouldn't be given out.
I will give you maybe some credit on this with McFarland. You're being critical of McFarland. I know Ryan O'Reilly was having a poor year with St. Louis. I know that. But you want to talk about intangibles. You want to talk about a guy that brings that extra sauce to you. I am very curious, and now Toronto, for the first time in forever, actually made it past the first round. I mean, you got to see these Toronto people. They're losing their minds about winning a first round. I mean, welcome to the second place parade, guys. But okay, it's appropriate that they're so close to Buffalo, I guess. You should have got Ryan O'Reilly. Really, seriously. Why didn't they? There was a need. There was an availability. You could have easily snatched up Ryan O'Reilly. I don't get that one. And to say, well, we got Lars Eller. Talk about, yeah, Rachel, you're right. I mean, yippee, we got Lars. That one with everything else going on, that addition could have saved the day. Ryan O'Reilly could have saved the day. And I bet you anything, had Ryan O'Reilly been snatched up, we're probably talking about, 5 games against the Kraken, and then we'll see from there. I don't think they would have won the Stanley Cup, but I think they would have dispatched Seattle relatively easily had they had Ryan O'Reilly.
Oh, man. An Avalanche season comes to an end. This one hurt a lot worse. I remember last year after the Nuggets got bounced in round 1, we were like, all right, like that's what we were expecting to happen. I think this stings a little bit more because no one was expecting the Avs to get bounced round 1. But of course, we'll see what they do in the offseason. But Jerry Jeudy does get his 5th-year option signed. What's your biggest takeaway from this, Will Peterson? Are you happy about it, or were you wanting to see them, trade or move around Jerry Jeudy?
No, I'm thrilled. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. Listen, guys, you can't say this is the year we try to fix Russell Wilson and then take away his biggest weapon from him. That makes absolutely no sense. This decision took longer than it should have, but they got through the draft. They realized trading Jeudy wasn't going to be an option, and they picked up the 5th-year option. You cannot say, we want to know what Russell Wilson is, and then say, oh, but go throw the ball to Marvin Mims and Albert O. Like, no, go throw the ball to Jerry Jeudy, and let's see if he can be fixed. Let's see if the problem was Wilson or Hackett. No-brainer to pick up Judy's 5th-year option.
Yeah. Bye, KJ Hamler. Bye, KJ. See you later.
Great, so.
Yeah, the Broncos told you what they thought. I don't think they dislike KJ Hamler, but I think they're telling you what they think of his possibilities in the future. I assume they'll just cut him at this point because of Marvin Mims. And I like what I see out of Marvin Mims. Plus, again, what I've said a million times, you never want somebody returning punts that's all they do. There's too much on the line. They have to prove themselves constantly. I have always said I don't want somebody back there touching a ball unless he makes $2 million a year. I mean, that's, literal and metaphorical, meaning you want somebody back there with experience who's a real football player, not a track star like Montreal Washington. So the pick of Marvin Mims eliminates 2 positions, KJ Hamler and Montreal Washington. It actually frees up a roster spot to do other things. So I think that's a brilliant pick based on what we now know is probably an injury with KJ Hamler. They don't expect to get any better. Jerry Jeudy, as I've said, and I've been ridiculed for, is the best player on the team. So I'm all for paying the best player on the team the fifth-year option, which is a placeholder, guys, until they negotiate a new contract with them. Yes, I'm excited about retaining the best football player on the team.
It's got to be step one of two, though. The other mistake this team has made is not making Jerry Jeudy the number one receiver. Right? When Cortland Sutton was hurt last year and Jerry Jeudy got to play X and he was the guy, it's no coincidence that that's when he had his best games. Like the continuing to go down the path of, oh, Cortland's the guy. Enough with the nonsense. Jerry Jeudy's the best offensive player on this team. They need to have him be the number one receiver and see what they can get out of him. They've been messing around with bad quarterbacks and bad coordinators and bad decisions for 3 years. So this was a no-brainer move. Hopefully it's a sign that they're going to continue to do smart things. And that's, hey, our passing game, first and foremost, it goes through Jerry Jeudy. That's why we spent the number 15 overall pick on him. Okay, good. They're starting to do some smart things at Dove Valley. That's a step in the right direction.
We saw George Payton and no. Who was at the game last night? Sean Payton and Greg Penner were at the game last night, and it was very interesting. They had moved up from the box and all the way down to him. Peyton Manning was also in attendance last night, and obviously couldn't be good luck for the Avs. But it was interesting. Greg Penner and Sean Payton, they sat together the whole time, and they chit-chatted the entire time, whether they were up in the box or whether they were right down there on the ice, you guys. And I found that fascinating that your owner and your head coach are best of friends.
I just am excited that a owner of a local sports team was at Ball Arena.
Josh Kroenke almost did get hit with a camera yesterday, so there was that.
Yeah. Josh Kroenke was like steamrolling towards the locker room. I think he knocked over Brian, the cameraman from Channel 4, but like that was interesting. But to Rachel's point, Penner. Now this is really funny. Penner and Sean Payton sat in the exact seats that our pal Derek Wolf sat in for games, I think, 2 and 5. So those are obviously some pretty special seats. It was funny, too. They only sat in the seats during the one period the Avs were shooting at the Kraken net, and then when they were shooting the other way, they went back up to the owner's box. So those seats actually sat unoccupied for 2 out of the 3 periods. So, being wealthy has its privileges, I suppose. But listen, you can't snooze on the fact that there's this interesting relationship between Sean Payton and Greg Penner that seems to skip over George Payton. I don't know if George Payton was serving him snacks in the Lexus Club, but he certainly was nowhere to be seen last night. So you do have...
Chris McFarland can help with that soon, too. George Payton and Chris McFarland could be buddies together in the Lexus Club. Both going to be looking for new gigs.
Maybe. I mean, schleppy is not an inaccurate way to describe either of those guys in terms of what their relationship is with the organization. But I think they're the smartest guys in the room. I understand the criticism, but I think these are the guys that sort of take care of the day-to-day. So to give you credit, I think the big picture stuff maybe a little bit over both of their heads. It's about the minutia and the details of getting the trains to run on time that those guys are probably the best at. But that's a big step to go from just making sure a day-to-day thing goes from a big picture sort of huge decision-making process. And listen, you got to watch the body language between Sean Payton and Greg Penner. It's like Sean Payton was explaining everything to Greg Penner like the entire game. It was impossible to miss. So it's crystal clear who's in charge and who's ruling the roost. And they moved up twice, guys. Twice they gave up picks to move up. They still got 5 draft picks, but twice they moved up, and that is not George Payton's style.
Not at all. It's going to be interesting. James Merrilat, Will Peterson, thank you so much for hanging with us on this morning as we celebrate.
Nuggets.
Yeah, go Nuggets, exactly, because we are at the Avs funeral last night, and it's a little sad. I wore my black, and Will, is your shirt black or is it blue?
No, it's black, yeah.
It was a funeral, but we'll look ahead to next year for sure. But we do have to talk about the Nuggets and Suns. Thank you so much. And we've got Kellen Olson from Arizona Sports hanging out with us for a little bit to break us down what we can expect to see out of the Suns. Kellen, good morning. How are you?
I am great. How are you guys doing? Okay after last night, or how are we doing?
It's a little tough. Like I said, I'm wearing my black because it was a funeral. It's sad, but we look ahead to next year for sure. Now, of course, the Nuggets have a big game 1 against the Suns. I think maybe some of us might have been a little surprised, but of course, the players that needed to show up for the Suns still did it. What are you expecting to see tonight out of the Suns as they look to kind of bounce back?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the Suns choose to defend Jamal Murray because the way that I wrote it after game 1 is that if Denver has the best player in the game again and it's not Nikola Jokic, the Suns are not going to win this series. And Jamal was fantastic in that game. The way that the momentum of the game carried over and he just seemed to rise up as the crowd did as well was remarkable to see in the fourth quarter. And the Suns, in that fourth quarter, they kept scoring, but they couldn't get any stops. And a lot of it had to do with Jamal and how they play that pick and roll. But as you guys know, if you double team Jamal Murray, you're leaving Nikola Jokic in a 4-on-3 situation. That's a horrible idea too. So it's one of those interesting parallels where if Jamal is playing at this level, how exactly do you defend him with Jokic on the team? I don't know, but that's what I'm watching for sure. And then on the Suns side, I think DeAndre Ayton, we saw 2 years ago how well he played against Nikola Jokic, but he certainly did not come up to the task in game 1. I think that his energy, engagement, all those kinds of things have been on and off for his whole career here, really. And now we're just looking at this as, all right, game 2, game 1, you had I don't know if you guys saw this. There was a clip of him that went viral where he was just standing there for a couple of seconds while Jokic was tapping up offensive rebounds. It was on SportsCenter's Instagram. It went viral, this whole thing. He commented on it. So he seems aware of the problem at least now. So we'll see if it translates on the court for game 2.
As talented as the Suns are scoring, they don't have any presence besides Ayton underneath. And the Nuggets just ate them up on the rebounding end of things.
Yep.
The Nuggets are dominating teams in the playoffs when they're out rebounding them. So I'll ask you, how in the world, and you guys don't even have 5 starters. You have 4 starters and then just a lot of nothing. You don't even go 5 deep, never mind 6, 7 deep. That was the big takeaway for me. Durant's going to get 30. Booker's going to get 30. Paul's going to throw in, 18, right, on a good night. Where are you going to get your advantage and change things on the rebounding aspect of things?
Well, that's the interesting part of game 1 because I don't think that, at least for me, I didn't go in thinking rebounding was going to be a huge key to the series specifically, but rebounding and second chance points has been a huge problem for the Suns. If you go back 2 years ago to the finals, second chance points and points off turnovers, they were getting mauled by the Bucks, just destroyed. That New Orleans series last year where they got out in 6 games somehow, points off turnover, second chance points were killing them. And it's been a problem for this team over the last couple of years. Durant is a bigger forward necessarily, and he had, 14 rebounds last night, but it goes back to DeAndre again, specifically with the rebounding, because, Jokic had, 8 or 9 of those offensive rebounds on his own. So it does go back to him a bit. But to your point on the 4 starters, a big concerning number for them last night was that they only had 20 assists and then they only took 23 threes, but at halftime they only took 5. And this is a team that over the course of their implementation under Monty Williams the last 2 to 3 years, they've been known for what's called 0.5 basketball, which basically means when you get the ball, make a decision in 0.5 seconds or less. Shoot, pass, dribble, whatever, and keep it moving. You didn't see that last night. You saw a lot of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker scoring on their own, and you guys might look at that and see the team with 2 stars and think that's how this normally goes for Phoenix. It's really not. It's not their style at all. So if they can get back to moving the ball, that's where that problem of having a top-heavy roster sort of offsets, because you put those guys in positions where they can succeed and score and contribute in that kind of way. But if they're playing in this kind of way, and again, this is not because of the way the Suns played. It's because of the way the Nuggets played. They were outstanding defensively within their principles and everything that they wanted to achieve. So if the Suns are able to counter what Denver tried to do defensively to shore up the ball movement and kind of force Durant and Booker to not beat them on their own, but being okay with that and shutting down and getting the turnovers, generating things like that elsewhere, the Suns are going to be in trouble. This is a huge game too.
Kellen, I'm curious. Sorry, D-Mac, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm curious. When we all remember when Kevin Durant got traded, it was this huge news. It was Super Bowl week, so everybody in Phoenix said was switching gears to oh my gosh, Kevin Durant's joining the Suns. They're now contenders for a championship. What was the biggest difference that you noticed, though, between the Suns before and their play before Kevin Durant and how their game has changed now with Kevin Durant? Obviously, somebody who has won an NBA championship and somebody who is obviously extremely talented.
Yeah, it's just how deep they are, right? They just aren't a deep basketball team anymore, and they had depth concerns before for sure. But you guys have seen how valuable Contavious Caldwell-Pope has been for you guys. When you guys can get someone who is a really good on-ball defender or just a good defender overall, and then they can shoot that 3-and-D guy you want to call him. The Suns had 3 of them, and they gave up 3 of them in that deal. The whole Jay Crowder thing was this whole other mess that we don't have to get into today. But Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson were 2 really good players on both offense and defense. And so when you take away 3 of those guys for one guy, it just threw off their balance a lot. And right now you're seeing it where even last night, like we went into game 1 of the Clippers series, like, okay, Monty might try a couple of things because they've got 10 or 11 guys. They got to get down to 7 or 8 and they haven't quite figured it out yet. That's okay. But then even last night, like we're seeing Jock Landale in there in the second half instead of Bismack Biyombo. Like he's still trying to figure out who these 8 or 9 guys are. And that was a lot more cemented, a lot more in fact before the Durant trade.
Listen, the Suns are an incredibly talented team, and I've been telling people to just, everybody who thinks like the Nuggets are going to sweep this thing, chill out a little bit. I mean, the Nuggets are shooting over 50% from 3 in the first half. That's unusual.
Yeah.
You're getting KCP and Aaron Gordon and Jeff Green hitting threes. Here's the problem that the Suns or any team has. If that's going to happen, every team is going to be in big trouble because it takes so much energy guarding Porter Jr., Jamal, and Jokic. It's happened all year. The Nuggets have an absurd amount of uncontested three-point attempts. It's whether or not they can make them. Mm-hmm. But here's what Phoenix now will have to do. They're going to have to extend themselves to guard against the 3. Well, guess what's going to happen? Jokic could go for 40 down low. The Suns actually beat the Nuggets points in the paint. And here's the biggest problem teams are having against the Nuggets. The Nuggets have multiple ways to beat you. The Suns, like a few other teams, they're very one-dimensional. But that one dimension can be really, really, really good. So it's not that you can't win with that one dimension, but it's just one dimension, and the Nuggets can do things in a plethora of ways. So I think this will come back to the norm a little bit. I don't think the Nuggets will be quite as hot shooting. And then you guys are just going to have to get 30-30 out of Booker and Durant and probably then some. But that can work. It can work. It's worked in the past.
Yeah, you can win a series that way. You can win a championship that way. It's crazy how much star power does in the NBA, but I completely agree with a lot of what you said there. The Jokic point is really sound on the shooting because if you watch the tape on the Aaron Gordon threes, Durant was mostly helping off when Jokic was rolling inside. They just did not want Jokic to get the ball anywhere within 14 feet. And if he got a little bit further out and he backed down 8, and so be it, they were going to live with it. But I think they're going to continue to play off those shooters specifically. The one guy I'm curious to see is Bruce Brown. I love Bruce Brown. I think he's a really good basketball player. But the way that he was a scorer in that game, like he was scoring inside at will, especially in that fourth quarter when they were going small. If he's beating you in that kind of way, if Jamal's playing the way that he did, and then if Gordon is knocking down shots and giving you 20+, no one can beat the Nuggets. No one. Not even the Suns team if they're fully rolling.
Let me tell you something, too. He's going to be available. He's only on a 1-year deal. I don't know where the Suns are financially, but Matt Ishbia, money doesn't seem to be a problem. That is a scary thing. If the Phoenix Suns, and trust me, Bruce Brown would be starting on 90% of the teams in the NBA. He really is a virtual starter because him and KCP actually do have very similar minutes at the end of the day. But that's exactly who the Suns need. That Bruce Brown is at and he's got a history with Durant. He said he knew what Durant was going to do, and that's why he stole the ball from Durant when he had those back-to-back dunks. You guys, we'll see what happens in the series, but I'll tell Phoenix something. You should do everything you can to get Bruce Brown, because I don't think the Nuggets are going to be able to afford him in the offseason, unfortunately.
Well, the interesting thing that you brought up there and the comment about ownership as well, Bruce Brown was brought in on the taxpayer mid-level exception, and the Suns had a taxpayer mid-level exception under previous ownership. They did not use it. They did not use it on a player. So that is something where you look at Bruce Brown, how pivotal he was in game 1, how pivotal he is going to be for this series. The Suns could have had that similar type of player. Like you look at Dante DiVincenzo playing key minutes for the Warriors. He was another guy. Danilo Gallinari was signed on that deal for Boston before he got hurt. The Suns just didn't use it. I'm guessing they will use it now in the future, of course, with the change in ownership. But man, it's such a problematic thing when you run into this depth thing. And something that came up with the Durant deal too is that oftentimes when deals like this happen in the middle of the season as opposed to the off season, it throws off your roster construction. That's what we're seeing right now with the mismatch in depth. But the problem is you look at this and say, like, okay, maybe this is not their year. Maybe next year is their year. Well, Chris Paul's a year older. Kevin Durant is a year older. And they're in this really delicate space right now where it does feel like this year is their best chance to win. But their roster is going to be much more well-constructed next year because James Jones has always done an excellent job. But this was a mid-year kind of thing where I don't know how closely you guys followed the story, but it sure seemed like from all of the reporting that James Jones did not want to give up Mikal Bridges in this deal for the exact kind of reasons we're seeing right now, both with what happened with him in Brooklyn, but also what's happening here. They just seem a guy short. To your point, they have 4 starters. They just can't find a fifth right now. Imagine Mikal Bridges or Cam Johnson as that fifth starter right now. This team would be unstoppable, but they don't have that guy, and they got to trade through, and they did what they should have, which is get Kevin freaking Durant, but at what cost? We're seeing it at least for one game so far, what the cost can be.
What's the energy like down there in Phoenix and in Arizona as a whole? Because I think a lot of people here in Denver were really looking forward to this series. Like, this was the one everyone was like, all right, this is going to be really good. But of course, the Suns were the favorite up until, I believe, this morning, and now the Nuggets are now the favorite. So are people nervous about the Nuggets, or is there still a ton of faith in Phoenix?
Oh, I think everyone is taking the Nuggets extremely seriously. Kevin was asked after game one, I don't know if you guys saw that at all, about how if he's surprised by the Nuggets. He was like, surprised by the Nuggets. The team with the back-to-back MVP and the number 1 seed, surprised. The team is definitely not there, and I don't think the town is. There's this really, not curious, but it's funny to see a town like this compared to a town like us because we don't have any championships. We have one. We got it right after the D-backs were implemented in 2001. But you guys have had a serious core of not to take the burden off of last night's loss. I'm sorry, but it does help that you guys won it the year before. I'm just saying. But yeah. I'm saying this to make my point because every game, the fan base is so on edge for every single game because they just want this first championship so bad. For the Suns and then the Cardinals as well don't have one either, and it's just been this thing hanging over the town for a while now. When anything bad happens, they call it Arizona Sports. That's the name of our website and our station. But they're like, oh, Arizona Sports. Of course, Kevin Durant tweaks his ankle in pregame warmups. Oh, Arizona Sports. Of course, Kyler tears his ACL. Like all this kind of stuff, right, that keeps kind of coming up. And that sort of mantra and dread that hangs over the town is really interesting to see compared to a town like yours. It's the juxtaposition, if you will.
Hey, that's good for SEO purposes for our jobs, right?
Not bad.
Last one for you from me, Kellen, is just, you had mentioned Bruce Brown that you were really excited to see him tonight and what he has to do, but then who makes you the most nervous? Because after you said that, you named off a bunch of other guys too, including Aaron Gordon, KCP, because they can all be difference makers. But looking at tonight's game, who makes you more nervous besides the big three, Jamal, MPJ, and Jokic?
Oh, so I was going to say Jamal because I think that the inherent advantage to the point and like the way this conversation has kind of turned is that the Suns' biggest advantage is that they have 2 stars and the Nuggets have 1. But I have people calling him Bubble Murray, like, shut up. He's playoff Murray. Like, people acting like this bubble thing was like the way that he should be identified as a playoff performer. Like, no, he's a playoff performer. And if he's this guy, but to turn it to the other direction, I'm going to go with Jeff Green and cheat a little bit because the way in which the small ball minutes were extremely effective, and you guys know this better than me, when Jokic sat during the regular season, it was a glorified dumpster fire. It was horrible for you guys. But when it's turned around in the playoffs, in that Minnesota series, they were effective in those small ball lineups when Jokic sat, and they were effective in game 1. Mm-hmm. And the Suns kind of stuck to what's worked for them, I guess, quote unquote, by going big. But I think the Suns need to go small. That's been a lot of the conversation around Phoenix, is that they have to go small and soon. They have to make a couple of rotation tweaks still, and one of them is looking to go away and play against small ball because Green and what he's able to do from a versatility perspective, offensively and defensively, is so sound within that that the Suns need to counter that and match it as well.
All right. D-Mac?
Yeah, you guys are in big trouble, but I'm not saying it's impossible because the talent is spectacular. 2 incredible guys could work, but the rebounding is going to be the big issue. Going small against the Nuggets. I mean, listen, shoot 50% from 3 and you'll be all right. I mean, but you guys didn't even try. I mean, in the first half, so We'll see. I think you're just constructed a little too soon. You're not done yet. I think the Suns will be much, much better next year, and will be tough to contend with. Now watch, this will hit me in the butt, and the Suns will go on this ridiculous roll right now. But again, I'm just talking about if what happened in Game 1 continues to happen. Nuggets shoot well and rebound. There's no answer for a team that doesn't have a fifth starter. Never mind any depth, and the Nuggets have the Crayola box crew. We got Brown, Green, and Brown, and just those three guys off the bench that interweave, if you could see it, with the starters. Like they really just mix in well. It's not like a whole other unit coming in. This is what the Nuggets have been building towards this whole year, and then you have the Nuggets all or nothing. You say the Suns win now. That's nothing compared to what the Nuggets have in terms of this. What the Nuggets are building on right now has gone for years. And I would say the Durant thing is just it's a Bobby Brown new edition. It'll be better next year. So we'll see how it goes. If the Suns lose by more than 15 tonight, this thing is toast. I don't care what happens in Phoenix. If the Suns can keep it close, maybe they figured out a path. This game tonight will basically tell you everything you need to know about the series.
Crazier things.
First of all, sorry, Crayola box crew. Do you guys have T-shirts? Can I get one? That's great. I love that nickname.
DMAC made this saying too. This is all DMAC. I don't know how he came up with it, but it is brilliant. I also want a t-shirt. So maybe we need to get that rolling for sure. Kellen, thank you so much for taking some time. Definitely we need to catch up tonight at the game because we have not seen each other yet in person, but I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Anytime.
All right. Kellen Olson from Arizona Sports, as we will bring in Jake Shapiro, of course, to talk a little bit more about the Denver Nuggets as well because, well, first of all, Jake, good morning. How are you?
Good. Kellen was awesome, by the way. Great inside basketball stuff. But one thing I'll add, it's just this sheet of paper. It looks like a box score, but what it is math. And the math just doesn't work for the Phoenix Suns. One of the things Kellen mentioned is the Suns actually are better when they go a little bit smaller, particularly off the bench, because Bismack Biyombo is nearly unplayable at this point in his career. How are they winning the rebounds? They're just not going to out-rebound the Nuggets. And I wrote a whole story on this on Friday night, and perhaps I'm a little umptuous upon reflection, where I've written the Suns are going to lose and perhaps get swept by the Nuggets, but it just doesn't work. If the Nuggets shoot 17 more times than the Suns, it doesn't matter that Phoenix has two of the greatest shot makers of all time. It just doesn't. The Nuggets will win the series. And DMAC, you mentioned that the Suns didn't even try to shoot threes. The Nuggets' coverage and attempting what they were trying to get the Suns to do worked perfectly. They were forcing two of the greatest mid-range shooters in Booker and Kevin Durant into tough mid-range shots. They weren't letting them shoot threes. They ran them off the line, and then they had help side from the to meet them at the rim. So the Nuggets' game plan worked to perfection. Now, I know what you guys are saying and what happens when the Nuggets' game plan doesn't work to perfection. They had a lot of margin for error based off the math. So that's why I'm so confident about where the Nuggets are right now.
Okay, so that opens it up to, some of the props that are going on for tonight's game. Over or under 229, because we know 121 has been the key number for the Denver Nuggets. DMAC, are you taking the over or the under?
What is it? 229?
229.
That's a tough one. I will take the 122. Wow. Oh my God, that is a hell of a number right there. Because I got the Nuggets scoring 120 points.
Yep.
And that's well, how much will they allow? And if the game is toast, you're going to see a lot of garbage baskets in the last 3 minutes. So I'll take the over, but by I got it 122 to 109 tonight. Something like that. So I'll take it, but by a smidge.
Jake?
Just under. That's a great line.
I mean, it'll likely come down to complete garbage minutes.
Yep.
When the game is well decided, and we'll see if Peyton Watson hurls up a three, or give me a backbencher for the Suns there, Jake. I don't know if whoever's feeling nifty.
Everyone in Denver is going to be watching what Darius Baisley does at the free throw line with 7 seconds left.
I will tell you this: when guys get into a playoff game, they want to put some points up.
Mm-hmm.
once it gets under the shot clock, you really can't get away with it. But until it gets to that 24 seconds, guys shoot during that garbage time. I can't even believe we're having this conversation, considering that we think that this is going to go to garbage time. But I do think this is going to go to garbage time again this time.
Okay, the other one that's interesting, and of course, because Jamal has been popping off as of recently, the over under 25 and a half. Because I'm taking the over for sure. I think playoff Murray is here to stay.
Yeah, but they're gonna D him up in a different way. They're gonna make it difficult on Jamal tonight. And don't forget, Jamal hit 6 out of 10 3-pointers. Okay, so I would put him more at 4 out of 10 or probably 4 out of 9, something like that. 6 out of 10, that is wild. So, boy, oh boy, oh boy. I would take the under there, and I would say they're going to try to guard the Nuggets outside. And I think Jokic goes for over 30 tonight to sort of, come back from that. And do not be surprised at all if they're paying so much attention to Jamal Murray if Michael Porter Jr. goes off for 28, 29 points.
Smash the over. He is 3 for 6 this postseason in going over that amount of points, Rachel. All 3 of those games came at home. The one home game he played where he didn't score more than 25 and a half, he scored 24, and it was his postseason debut this year where he admitted to having butterflies. No, D-Mac, he will not hit 6 threes again. That would be surprising. But if he's shooting 24 times, he's probably going to make more than 13 field goals than he did in game 1. So I'm going to say Jamal Murray gets to the line a little bit more, hits more of his twos, and I would say, yeah, he's going to near 30 points once again.
That's what I'm feeling as well. All right, of course, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more Nuggets talk and hopefully talking about a Nuggets win. Jake, thank you so much, but we have to talk a little bit about the NFL draft too, D-Mac, because even though there was so much going on this weekend, we still had a draft, and I feel like we just haven't really talked about it. Of course, the Jerry Jeudy news this morning, but what grade would you give George Paton, Sean Payton on the draft? Because they bring in a wide receiver, a cornerback, a linebacker, a safety, and then a center. How you feeling about it?
Well, I just don't know these guys, Rachel, so I'm just taking their word on it. Like, I just understand why they did everything they did with the first 3 picks.
Yep.
Taking J.L. Skinner in the 6th as a safety, okay, maybe that's more of a special teams move right off the bat. And a depth offensive lineman who could be a center, that's a roll of the dice. So you can really only grade the first 3 rounds. So we know that Mims is super talented, and they moved up for him. And he's going to replace KJ Hamler in Montreal, Washington. Okay, you get 2 for 1 on that one. So I think that's an A. Drew Sanders, I've heard just amazing things about in terms of coverage ability, and they've really never addressed the inside linebacker position. So, okay, I'll take your word that, he's a huge guy, 6'5", 233. So he's kind of a tall, skinny inside linebacker who can really move. He's like a tight end playing linebacker. So, okay, fine, I'll give that an A. And Riley Moss, is, cornerback who's well regarded that they moved up for. Rachel, it appears that they got with their first 3 picks, 3 contributing players. And if that's the case, I'll give them an A. I don't see a reason to sit around on your hands and completely draft back for depth and special teams guys. I don't believe in that. I like a more aggressive approach they use in the first 3 picks. So I'll give them an A, Rach. I'll be generous. I'll say an A. I understand why they made the selections they did. And I'm looking at the list of undrafted free agents, and you kind of, never know. You got some fun ones there. You got a guy, an offensive lineman from Princeton. That's kind of fun. You got a dude from Western Colorado who's the cornerback. And, that's about as interesting as you get. You always got to keep your eyes on whoever they spend the most money on for the undrafted free agents. And I would say there's probably maybe 2 guys from this list that actually make the team. Radically, maybe 3. And you're probably going to have to depend on one of those guys, at least one, to actually be kind of a contributing player if this whole draft process is really going to work out for you, because, again, you only had 5 selections.
What do you believe, with all the talk that happened about the tight ends, what do you believe will happen with Albert O and Greg Dulcich?
Well, you did pick up, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. You did a trade for,
undrafted.
What's that?
The undrafted tight end?
No, well, they traded for that tight end from New Orleans. Gosh darn it, I'm forgetting his name.
Oh, you're correct. You are
So
correct.
they have 5 draft picks, and then they did a deal to pick up. Gosh darn it, what the heck?
I know, I can't think of his name
All
either.
right, brain freeze
Hold
right
on,
now.
I want it. Hold on.
But they got another tight end that Sean Payton's familiar with and comfortable with, and
Adam Troutman.
Troutman. Thank you, Troutman. So yeah, throw him into the mix too. Even though he, drafted, he was part of the draft day acquisitions. Now I like what they did, Rach. I think they're fine at tight end.
Mhm.
What do they think about Alberto and Dulcich? We're fixing to find out, as Gary Kubiak infamously said. I don't know. But you got Manhurst and Troutman. Well, they're certainly going to make the team. And then you've got 2 guys that seem to be the same dude with Greg Dulcich and Alberto. So I think a decision has to be made on one of those guys. And, we'll see. If they could trade Dulcich, I think they would have tried to have already done it. So it may be some sort of that would suck though. I mean, to draft Dulcich last year and just cut him. As much as I understand why they might like Alberto better, they've got a little bit more invested in Dulcich. But it's a coin flip, Rachel. It's a coin flip.
I completely forgot about Troutman, to be completely honest with you. There's been like so much talk about, what are they going to do at this position? And then of course the draft comes up. I think Alberto will be off of this team. I would be surprised if he's around by training camp, but I think you're right when it comes to Greg Dulcich, is they've already invested so much, and you're already going to see quite a few players that they drafted last year who probably aren't going to make the squad at all either.
Yeah, there's going to be a reckoning for the players. It's not going to quite be as dramatic as CU, right? But I mean, it's happening. It's happened. Again, like we detailed, you saw the relationship between Sean Payton and Greg Penner last night. We certainly know charge in that relationship, or not to say in charge in that relationship. We see where Sean Payton fits with the owner of the Broncos compared to George Payton. And hey, I mean, let's not let it be lost, everybody. Peyton Manning was up in that box too, hanging out with those guys. So you may have a very unofficial consultant with Peyton Manning that is talking on a regular basis to Sean Payton and Greg Penner as well. He's not officially being paid by the Broncos, but it's hard not to see the closeness in their relationship, and to see the 3 of them together was pretty interesting. All that being said, I don't know why they would move on from George Payton. Somebody has to draft, who we got here? Somebody's got to draft Alex Forsythe. Somebody has to have an eye on J.L. Skinner. I mean, how are you going to lock down Chris Leach from Kent State or Emmanuel Wilson, running back out of Fort Valley State? You think Sean Payton's doing that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, you've got to do all these type of things.
Yeah.
And, George Payton's that type of guy. Yeah. So I think this relationship with Sean Payton and George Payton, as long as they win, could go for quite a while. I don't know why they would change it.
I do think George Payton is on a 1-year deal, though, of if this is a bust, you're out the door. See you later. We don't need you. If it's
I get, but who is going to go watch incarnate word film to take Taylor Grimes? I don't know, Rachel. I just think, George Payton will work as Sean Payton's assistant and do whatever he wants.
But if there's a bust, there's another million people that could do it and get paid the amount that George Payton gets paid to say, hey, I could probably do it better than going and watching Incarnate Word or whatever it's going to be. I think he's on a 1-year deal, and it's going to be interesting to find out.
Well, we respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I think that.
Are you telling me that if you made as much as George Payton did, you wouldn't go watch Incarnate Word film? Because I sure as heck will.
Yeah, I mean, I would do a pogo dance on top of an infirmary. I don't know. I would do crazy things. I would do whatever you want. Same. I'll see east, west, north, south, classic shrine, senior, guacamole bowl. I'll do whatever you want for that kind of money. Listen, it's a weird sort of setup, but they got there. And it's not unusual that you have the coach with more power than the GM. That set up Belichick and Andy Reid and Sean McVay. I mean, that setup, Rachel, exists very commonly. I'd say in about half of the NFL teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, you don't usually get to it the way the Broncos got to it. But now that they're there, okay, fine. So I told you, they're two different personalities, George Payton and Sean Payton. I don't think there's any way in the world they would be like friends because they have nothing in common. But it's a working relationship that on the surface looks pretty good right now. Yeah. I mean, I do like how the offseason went. I do like how the draft went. I am not a fan of the way they've shut down the media because I just don't think we have the same excitement or interest in the Broncos as we normally would have. But, Rachel, the Avs did get eliminated yesterday, okay? There's going to be a big break in the Nuggets' schedule. After this game, they don't play till Friday. Yeah. Look for this to be a huge week with Broncos news and Broncos talk, and we'll get everybody familiar with what's going on. And soon enough, we'll be out at practice, meeting the guys and seeing what's going on. Soon enough. Rachel, it's May. Can you believe that it's May? Yeah. Insane. So we are going to turn our attention relatively quickly to the Broncos. The schedule's going to come out relatively soon. And more or less, you've got the team now. You do. This is the team. I mean, they may make some minor moves here and there, but no, this is it. So is this enough for Russell Wilson, who was at the game last night? He was at the game.
Really? I did not see that. Where was he at?
He was in a box, kind of a low-profile deal. He was there with Sierra. I got sent a picture of him there. He's wearing an Avs sweater. I think it was a Cale Makar sweater. And or it might have been McKinnon. I'm not sure who he prefers. But he was there. And did you notice there was no Russell Wilson on the Jumbotron? No. There was no Sean Payton on the Jumbotron.
No.
There was no Peyton Manning on the Jumbotron. No. They kept it very, very down low. Yeah. They kept their presence very quiet while still being at the game. Last year, you would have had Wilson on multiple times and Hackett on and everybody going crazy. So the Broncos are keeping a more low-key approach to everything, including last night.
It's interesting. Let me know in the comments, too, if you would like to see a little bit more in-depth about the newest Broncos players, because I don't think we're going to get too much out of Dove Valley anytime soon for that kind of stuff. And, of course, we've got some of the best scouts and Broncos beats writers, too, so we can always have them on to talk about it. But let me know in the comments if you would like to see that. DMAC, as always, an absolute pleasure. Huge shout-out to Kellen, to Jake, to Will, to James for joining us on today's show. It was fun. We love talking about all of this stuff, you guys. It's such a blast. Even when they lose, there's still a great conversation to be had. And so we will celebrate the funeral for the Colorado Avalanche and look forward to tonight for the Denver Nuggets and hope this train keeps on rolling. And just like that, we will be back tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. for another episode of Coffee Break. We hope you guys have a wonderful Monday, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.